Hello friends, followers and channel members, welcome back to another video here back on the channel in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, and lots of you have been asking me to create a video looking at setting up the Thrustmaster Airbus TCA Captain's Pack for Microsoft Flight Sim 24, because as many of you have probably got to grips with already, Flight Sim 24's control setup is rather difficult, with literally hundreds of different key binding options available for those of you who want to concentrate on your airliner flying, or maybe not even just airliner flying, but essentially want to fly your aircraft with a Thrustmaster Airbus TCA Sidestick, and if you're also utilizing the thrust levers, spoiler, flaps, axes, etc. Getting all of this set up to work across the board in Flight Sim 24 isn't straightforward. So what we're going to have a look at today is try and make it as quick and simple as possible. I do apologize in advance if this video goes on a little longer than you would like, but unfortunately Flight Sim 24 doesn't make it easy to set everything up. What I'm hoping to show you in today's video is setting up both the side stick, the thrust levers, throttle, the flaps, the spoilers, all of that, all of the key binds and the different axes that you need to fly the Airbus aircraft, various different Airbus aircraft, how to save the control configurations so that you can then use these in any aircraft in Microsoft Flight Simulator 24 across the board, and ultimately by the end everything should just work. So before we do go any further, the first thing you need to do is make sure that you have got the Thrustmaster side stick, throttle levers, etc., the full captain's pack if that's what you're setting up, all installed correctly, and you have the drivers installed. Now you get the drivers and download those from the Thrustmaster website. I will pop a link to this in the video description down below. You need these to make sure that all of the hardware works properly, both with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 as well as Flight Simulator 2024. I do have a full installation and setup video as well also on this channel, so check that out if you need to see that first. Alright, so let's go through the setup of the hardware to work with a general Airbus A320 aircraft. There are lots of Airbus aircraft available, of course, in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, ranging from the default A320, the inner builds version 2 A320, there's also now an A321, A330, so the list is endless. What I want to do in this video is get you set up for all of them using one profile. Now, of course, the first thing we'll have to do is go into the settings and ensure that when you go to the controls menu, you actually see your A320 pilot and your A320 quadrant throttle listed here. The A320 pilot is the side stick and the quadrant throttle are the thrust levers and also the spoiler and flaps axis add-on if you've got that as well. I will go through setting all of that up even if you've not got it, just so if in the future you do decide to add that to your collection, then you'll know how to have it all working. Okay, so first thing I want to do is talk about the things that are already set up. Now, by default, when you turn Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 on, and it has already recognized that you've got these, a lot of the buttons and switches, etc., should all be set automatically. At least that's the way it has been for me. But there are a lot of things that have been double binded, and it's these double bindings that cause a lot of issues, so I've found. For example, let's just search by input, and we're going to start with our throttle quadrant. So if I flick the engine number 1 starter after pressing the search by input, we see that that is joystick number 3. And as you can see, if I flick that once I've pressed the search by input button, it will then bring up everything that it is mapped to, which is correct for the Airbus. We want to set engine 1 fuel valve, the starter, and the engine master. So again, by default, that's fine. And there are no other bindings either. We can also do the same for engine number 2, which is joystick button number 4, as they call it here, and you can see that that is reciprocal for master and engine start number 2. One of the things I find Flight Simulator 2024 doesn't do, whereas 2020 did, is that it actually labeled each of the buttons on this kind of display interface, so it was nice, you knew which button was what. And you can then go through, if you wish, to check that all of the buttons, etc., are mapped to things that you want them to be mapped to, and not anything that has been double binded and can cause you issues. I did have an issue with one of my axes also being mapped to one of my brakes at one point. So every time I advanced throttle number 2, it was also applying brake pressure as well, meaning the aircraft would veer off the runway. So once I found that, we deleted that binding, which I will show you how to do in a moment, and then obviously we didn't have an issue. We can also check that the auto throttle disconnect is available. That is these red buttons here. Once again, just search by input, press the button, and there we can see arm auto throttle. Now obviously we've got an extra button down here, which if I search for this one, it's joystick button number 6, and you can see that it's toggle arm spoilers and brakes, so it is doing two things at once. Now I do have this to toggle arming the spoilers. Obviously we do that prior to takeoff and before landing, but what I don't want you to do is control my brakes, so we're going to delete this one. In order to do that, make sure you go to the little cog just there and then delete the assigned control, go back, and then when you press the save and back button, that will all be saved. So this is now controlling just the spoilers and nothing else. So if you also have the spoiler axes, the flap axes, which also has things like the parking brake and a landing gear, it's also just worth going through and searching by input, making sure that it's controlling what you want it to. So I've just flicked my gear up and down, which there you can see it's controlling that. Once you've got all of that set up how you want it, it's definitely worth just jumping back into the flight deck and checking everything. So for instance, the spoilers are working, we've got the flaps working as well. You can see the engine starter down in the middle of the pedestal there, turning as I move it. The engine starter switches also responding, and the parking brake on, off, and I'm not going to do the landing gear, we're on the ground. Hopefully that will work when we take off. But yeah, all of that is working nicely. Next though, we do need to have a look at the thrust levers, which is, I know, something that a lot of people have been having issues with, particularly when moving between different aircraft. Now, one of the things that is quite frustrating in Flight Sim 24 is if you go to the hardware settings, this is where we can see all of the different axes. So this would be the axes representing engine 1, engine 2, and I've also got the spoiler axes, the flaps axes on the captain's pack. And normally, if you then selected one of the axes and moved the, I'm just moving engine number 1 now up and down in the background, you would see this moving up and down. Well, it's not, which is an absolute pain, because it means that you can't go through and identify which axis is which. I've moved every single axis there whilst moving my engine number 1 thrust lever up and down, and as you can see, we've not had any movement. So I am calling this a bug in Flight Sim 24. If anyone knows any other reasons why that isn't moving, then please do leave a comment down below, helping me out and potentially many other people as well. But effectively, this at the moment doesn't move and doesn't work. You can adjust the sensitivities, as you can see there, the curvature of that line is moving, but in terms of actually showing where your thrust lever axis is when you're moving it up and down, it doesn't do that at the moment. So what I am going to do now is show you which axes should be which with regards to the spoilers, flaps and thrust. So going back to our controls page on the throttle quadrant, of course, let's first navigate down to power management. So this is where we obviously want to go set the throttle, and these are the axes that you need. So throttle 1 should be joystick L axis X, throttle 2 is joystick L axis Y. That is what controls the thrust in the Airbus aircraft. Now, if you are flying the Phoenix A320 family, you may find that you had it set to throttle one axis 0 to 100%. This didn't work in Microsoft Flight Simulator 24, however, Phoenix have just pushed a small update, meaning that it will work. So for the Phoenix aircraft, it doesn't matter which one of these you've got set, either the throttle one axis 0 to 100% or just the general throttle one axis. Make sure though you've only got it bound to one and not both. So these are the thrust calibrations for basically your two-engined jets in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. Joystick L-axis Y, joystick L-axis X. Okay, so now let's have a look for our spoiler axis, and the quickest way to do that is just to search for it. So the spoiler axis in the Thrustmaster is the joystick R axis Z. Now, it's all well and good telling you that these are the axes. If yours are actually set to the wrong axes and you want to change them, let me show you how to now assign those. So the spoiler axis X, let's go into our settings, and what you have to actually do is scroll all the way down on here and turn it on. Once you've turned that on, then your spoiler axis will work. There's no way to sort of assign it other than doing this. You can't just move it and then assign it like you can push a button, because that works with push buttons, as we saw a little bit earlier when configuring those, but for the actual axis in Flight Sim 2024, you need to use this menu and switch on the axis that you want. Let's then go and find the flaps axis. Just search for that. And there you are. The flaps axis is joystick L axis Z. So that is your two engine axes, your spoiler axes, and also then your flap axes. All done, and there are the settings that if you copy should work. One thing I then recommend doing, because this has been so over-engineered in my opinion, definitely not intuitive at all, is once we're happy with that, I would go to my airplane controls. General controls are very different. They are usually things like bringing up menus and such, not used for controlling the aircraft. So airplane controls, and then what I am going to do is I'm going to just rename this to something like EasyJet Sim Pilot. Okay, that should then save everything, and it means now that whichever Airbus aircraft I am flying, I will be able to navigate the menu to use the EasyJet Sim Pilot controls that we have just set up for the thrust levers, spoilers, etc. I also, funnily enough, for my keyboard, have an EasyJet Sim Pilot settings config as well, and basically this is for just all my cameras and things like that. What I haven't found is a way to actually export this, because if I could export it, I could then pass it on to you guys, and hopefully then you'll find it rather more intuitive than the default Flight Sim 24 settings. If anyone does know how to export the controls, then let me know. I'll try and get that config downloaded for you, pop it in our Discord, and hopefully you'll also then be able to benefit. Okay, so next then we are going to go to our side stick. Again, sadly none of these buttons are labeled. There are a lot of buttons of course on the Thrustmaster Airbus side stick, which is great to add in, but Flight Sim 2020 used to show you which button was which, and this picture here doesn't. So let's go through and show you what I have set up on here and the various axes as well. Now, given that there are so many buttons on the Thrustmaster side stick, which is great, meaning you can have a variety of different controls all set up, every one will be different. I'm going to go through and show you what I have mapped where, and then obviously you can take that, copy it if you wish, or see how to set it up to configure it the way you wish. First of all though, I want to have a look at the basic function, which is of course the different axes, the left aileron, right aileron, and then obviously we want the elevators for nose down, nose up. Let's make sure that we're set to our A320 pilot, this side stick, and then let's have a look at the flight control surfaces. So primary flight control surfaces, which obviously the most important, we want the aileron axis. So the aileron axis for this is joystick L, axis X, and then the elevator axis for up and down is joystick L, axis Y. Again, if these aren't assigned, then all you need to do is go into the little cogwheel there, again, find the axis that we need and switch it on. Now obviously the Thrustmaster also is a twist stick, so there is another axis available which we can use for our nose wheel steering, or if you don't have rudder pedals you can also assign it to the rudder as well to make the crosswind landings a little bit easier. To assign it first of all to the nose wheel steering, which is what I have it assigned to because I do have rudder pedals, we can just do a little quick search for that, and the nose wheel steering axis is joystick R, axis Z, and again that is the twist stick action that we have on here. If you don't have rudder pedals, you can also assign joystick R, axis Z to your rudder as well, and again we could perhaps just go to our flight control surfaces. It is a primary flight control surface, and so the rudder axis, this is the one here that you would need to assign for that, again just by flicking the relevant axis on for that. I'm obviously not going to do that because I do have rudder pedals. I only use the twist axis on here when I'm on the ground for the nose wheel steering. Now if you don't have the thrust levers, then this side stick does actually come with a little slider which you can use to control the thrust of your aircraft. Now that at the moment by default, if I search for input and slide it, on here in 2024 it is called the joystick slider X. That is bound, as you can see here, for the throttle axis. Now actually I don't want this. I didn't realize that that was set until making this video, so I am going to go in and delete that. I control the throttle by my thrust levers, but obviously if you do not have thrust levers, then you can use the throttle axis here for joystick slider X. If you're finding though that this isn't working, of course remember what we saw earlier on in the video, you could set the joystick slider X to control the engine throttle axis 1 and also engine throttle axis 2. For now though, I'm going to go in here and delete that because I certainly do not want this affecting my thrust when we're flying. So that's been deleted. You can obviously set that as you need. Okay then, so the next thing to do is to go through and see what all of these have been assigned to. If I start over here, this is the sort of top left as well, looking at it, search by input, and that's not assigned to anything. Great, but I would want to go through all of these and double check because I actually don't want these to be assigned to anything, because if I catch it by mistake it could cause problems. This though is where you can decide what you want each of those buttons to be assigned to. You can either leave them set to the defaults if you wish, but for me as I go through those you can see some things have been set and I basically don't want them. Some of them are actually quite useful, particularly if you do not have the full captain's pack of the thrust levers. Obviously as I do, I'm happy to go through and get rid of all of these, and I might come back in at some point and assign them to something else. But yeah, certainly for now want to go through all of these and get rid of them just so I don't catch them by mistake. Now one of the things I do like to have, and this is just personal preference, I do love my custom views, basically the lovely wing views that we have all around different parts of the cabin. I have at least 6 wing views inside the cabin, and there are 6 buttons here, so I actually like to assign all of these to them, which means obviously when I'm streaming and flying I can quickly flick between those nice wing views. You find those once you've set them up, and I have got a video tutorial on the channel showing you how to set up those custom views. If you go to then Cockpit camera, and it is the custom camera it's called in Flight Sim 24, so you can very quickly then go through setting up. I'm just pressing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on there. Obviously those numbers don't correspond to these numbers here, but that doesn't matter as long as I know what they mean. So if we go back, save, back into our aircraft, and then if I then flick those buttons on my side stick, we should see that we get some nice custom views, and they're all beautifully set up, easy to flick between them, and there they are. So that's now set. So now that's all been set, I'm going to come down here, I'm going to rename this again once more. We just want to call that something memorable for me, EasyJet Sim Pilot. That's now saved, and it means that whether I'm flying the Phoenix, the A310, anything, whether I'm flying the Phoenix, the A310, the A320, A321, the Innobuilds aircraft, etc., the Beluga, I can use the same airplane controls for this as well. It is rather overly complicated, so I do apologize if this hasn't been a quick setup video, but hopefully it's gone through everything, and I've had so many people asking me to do a video showing how all of my controls are set up. The only thing I haven't touched on are my rudder pedals, which if I quickly just go through into the flight control surfaces here, just so you can see the various different axes that control those. Basically, the rudder axes, which we saw a little bit earlier on in the video, is joystick L axis Z, and then I've also got the brakes as well. If I just search for that, yeah, there we go, the left brake axis, the right brake axis, if you want to sort of assign those independently. You can also do that too if you have rudder pedals. So now it doesn't matter which aircraft we use to spawn in with, you will be able to use the controller menu and use the settings that we've just done. Of course, there's then one further thing we need to do that is unique to Airbus aircraft. And this is the same for the A300, A310, 320 family, 330, 340, 350, 380. All of the Airbus aircraft have detent with their thrust lever settings. Now obviously this is a different aircraft to what we've just set up all our profiles for, but because we've saved those, we go into our settings, back to the controls, and then for the throttle quadrant, I can then come down here, make sure EasyJet Sim Pilot is set. The side stick, again, same thing. So all of those controls from the A321 that we've just set up are now transferred across and will work exactly the same. And you can do something similar with your keyboard controls as well. So if we go to that, I've got an EasyJet Sim Pilot setting there. And so whilst it does seem to take a while to get everything set up and working correctly, at least once you've done it, you can use them across every different aircraft. There are also options for specific A330 controls that you might want to use, or of course any other different aircraft, but to be honest, because the kind of aircraft that I'm usually flying are the airliner types, I tend not to really have to use this. The final thing you will have to do then if you're flying an Airbus aircraft is calibrate the detents. By now you're probably familiar with the fact that we have 6 different positions for Airbus throttle. We have max reverse, we have idle reverse, we have idle, we've then got climb, flex and toga. And at the moment, as you can hear, if I'm moving the thrust levers, we're not actually getting anything registered and any movement inside the sim. So you'll have to go to the respective aircraft's EFB or tablet, and usually you'll find there is on the options, there's then the throttle settings, and then you'll be able to set them from here. So again, I do apologise that this has been a rather long, complex video, but I know many of you were asking for a Thrustmaster setup guide in Flight Sim 2024 with lots of the details. Hopefully we've covered all of that. If you're still unsure or have any questions, please leave a comment down below and I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much for watching, and of course if this has been useful, please don't forget to leave a like, and if you are new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications bell so you don't miss any of our future videos and of course live streamed flights. Thanks for watching. I shall see you all again in the next one. Bye bye for now.